Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Christus, and I'm going to be the presenter today for this session. And today's topic is about secure APIs. So you can see the previous sessions that are marked in green, which are completed. So if you have missed any of these sessions, you can always go to the same registration link and you can view the past webinars, and then you can also download the question and answer for each and every specific webinars, which is available there. You can just download it and take a look at it anytime. So if you want to view the webinar, you can just view it right from here. All the previous webinars are available right here. So we have few more sessions coming up in the upcoming days. And today we are going to talk eliminating password hard coding with secure APIs. That's our topic today. And we are coming up with making informed business decisions based on clear track records. So reports is going to help you with that. Utilizing enterprise-ready integrations and advanced configurations, and disaster recovery options that we have in Password Manager Pro. And finally, for managed service providers, how do you manage the organizations using Password Manager Pro is what we are going to see in the upcoming webinars. So let's, with no further delay, let's get into today's topic. We have secure APIs, and even this webinar is being recorded, and it will be available on the same link maybe in about 2 or 3 days. You can view the webinar, and during the session, if you have any questions, feel free to just post them in the control panel. We'll make sure we'll address most of them during the end of the webinar. So again, today's topic is about secure APIs. So let's just directly jump into the webinar. Application to application password management. So before we get into our today's topic, so why do we need an API? Again, to make the work easier. So for seamless connectivity or for automation, you use an API. And how does it actually function? An API, it sends a request from a server or from a client to a server, waits for a response from the server, and all this is happening in an automated way. In today's digital world, everything is automated. So using an API, you can achieve anything that you want. So how Password Manager Pro helps you out here is what we are going to see today, and what are the options available of different types of APIs is also we are going to cover today during the webinar. So the main motto is to eliminate password hard coding using Password Manager Pro APIs. This is our agenda for today. So you have passwords hard coded. So in previous sessions, if you would have attended, or if you're familiar with Password Manager Pro, you know you have a vault. You can store the passwords, you can securely share the passwords, and you can remotely manage the passwords we discussed. So for any devices that you have, any legacy devices you have, or any servers you have, any network devices, you can manage the passwords right out of Password Manager Pro. But what if an application holds the passwords to perform its task? So an application pretty much will have a password in a configuration file or a script file hard coded, which is again a major threat for any organization to have a password hard coded in an application, as well as if it is unchanged for years, it's going to become a major threat. So that is what we are going to see today, how Password Manager Pro is coming for this rescue. So how it helps you to eliminate password hard coding with the use of secure APIs. So the options that we have in Password Manager for the supported APIs are the RESTful API, which is the modern technology, and we have SSH command line interface based API, and we have XML-RPC API supported in Password Manager Pro. And today we are going to cover most about the RESTful API that we have in the product. So again, eliminating password hard coding with secure APIs. You have passwords in a script or in a configuration file. You don't want to have it anymore after you implement the API option in Password Manager Pro. So whenever an application needs a password, it queries Password Manager Pro to take the APIs. So let's see how useful it is and how you can use Password Manager Pro in order to retrieve passwords using the APIs. So the first and foremost, the main thing that you have to do is to create an API user in Password Manager Pro. So what does an API user actually mean? Why do you need an API user in Password Manager Pro? So basically, when you need a password, being a human user, as an administrator in Password Manager Pro term, you can add passwords inside Password Manager Pro, as well as an user, you can retrieve the password. So you will get into the interface to do those functions, to add or retrieve passwords as a human user. But how can an API actually get in? So again, API is a scripting, so there should be some authentication mechanism to query Password Manager Pro to fetch any information out of it, so any passwords that you want, right? So that is why we create an API user in Password Manager Pro, and this would the diagram would give you a clear idea. So here we have an API user, which is nothing but the host from where you raise the request to the PMP server. Once the PMP server validates the request, it sends a response back to the API user or a host from where the request is being raised. So let's see how you create an API user in Password Manager Pro. So I'm just going to log in as an administrator into the Password Manager Pro web interface quickly. Oh, sorry. Okay. It happens all the time. So I used to type a wrong password. Yes. So now we are into Password Manager Pro. And now we are going to see how do you create an API user right in Password Manager Pro. Okay, so we have the user section here. You see the users that are added into Password Manager Pro using various methods you have in Password Manager Pro, and you assign the roles. So we have discussed this about in our previous topic. So if you have missed it, you can always view the recording. So this is where you create the users in Password Manager Pro with various methods, and you assign the roles, which is very important. This is the same for the API user. So you have to just understand or remember just two difference. One is the API user, which is the application user. Second one is the human user in Password Manager Pro. Application user is nothing but a host from where the API request is made, is the API user in Password Manager Pro. So we had an API user right here in the product. So let me delete the one that I already have. It doesn't make any conflict. So this is how you do a transfer ownership if an administrator owns any resources in Password Manager Pro. So I have transferred the ownership because when you have a user, an administrator owning the resource, you'll not be able to delete them in Password Manager Pro. So I did a transfer ownership of this user to somebody else who's to be an administrator to delete the user. So now I'm going to add an API user, again the same user, which is my box from where I'm going to raise the request. So the username can be anything that you can understand to identify that's an API user, or anything that you can identify that you add in Password Manager Pro. The host name is very important, using which we do the first level of authentication, kind of your login name, an account name that you provide in order to log in is what the host name that you have to provide for API. And I would use the same thing as the full name. Here you can specify a FQDN as well, based upon your choice. And an administrator user is what I'm going to create right now. It can be of any roles. So if you want the API user to input any data into Password Manager Pro, that is add any data into Password Manager Pro, it has to be an administrator. So if you want the API to just fetch information out of Password Manager Pro, it can be as password user, and you can have as many as password users you want in Password Manager Pro. Administrators are required when you add some data inside Password Manager Pro. So now, since I'm going to show you different examples, I'm making this user as an administrator. So now let me save it. All right. We have to select which type of API we are going to use, right? So either SSH CLI, which authenticates using a public-private key pair, or a XML-RPC API, which authenticates using an SSL certificate. And finally, the RESTful API is what I'm going to create right now, which authenticates using an auth token. Very simplest method that you can give it a shot. So I'm just going to copy the auth token so I don't miss it. Right. So I have the auth token ready, and I create the API user right into Password Manager Pro as an administrator. Right. So now we have created an API user in Password Manager Pro like any other user. This user doesn't own anything right at this moment. Right. So this user is just a user in Password Manager Pro which does not have any passwords associated to it. No passwords are shared to him, or even no passwords are added by this user into Password Manager Pro is what we are going to see in our next topic. So about the password management APIs and what are the options we have in the RESTful API. The APIs can be done via HTTP post, get, and put requests from the host. Also, the parameters that you send should be form URL encoded. So it should be a URL encoded form that you have to use as a parameter, and the auth token, which is mandatory to make an authentication against Password Manager Pro to do any operation. And it supports only JSON format, and you can see an example of the URL structure right there. So you have to provide the HTTPS. How do you access Password Manager Pro with the port number, or if it's 443, no port number, and you see a JSON request using REST API, and the auth token is right here. This is an example of an input data, or it's a get request to get the resource ID or account ID right from Password Manager Pro. It's an example. So let's see it real time, how it is actually working, how you can get this RESTful API to communicate with Password Manager Pro to add, fetch, or change any information. So the advantage of RESTful API functions is that any data you want to add in Password Manager Pro as a human user, the same functionalities can be leveraged using the RESTful API functions. So you have get request, put request, and post request, which is applicable for not only just resource accounts and passwords. You want to add any additional fields like resource types you want to assign, or you want to add additional fields to accounts and resource, you can do it. Or you want to fetch any information apart from resource, account, and password, you want to find a field that has to be used in a script, you can even fetch that out of Password Manager Pro. As well as if you want to do a bulk change of all the passwords, you can change the password using the APIs as well in Password Manager Pro. And these are the examples that we are going to see today. And I have two examples to show you. One is we're using the PowerShell. The other one is using the Python. All right, so let's get in and see how it actually works. Now we have an API user in Password Manager Pro. I pull a report against this user right from here. Oh, sorry, it's right here. So user report. Okay, so to see what is exactly shared to this user, I would say nothing, because there is nothing shared to this user yet. This is a new user we just created, right? So it's totally empty. So this user, to retrieve any information, let's say if this user is not an administrator, you're making him as a password user, and you want this API to fetch some information out of Password Manager Pro. And I'm going to share a resource here. Let me see if that has an accounts. No, it doesn't have any accounts. Right, so I have a resource called AWS. I'm going to share it with the user, which is the API user we just made. Consider now, just think that this is just a password user right now. It's not an administrator. Or let it be an administrator. Anyways, Password Manager Pro is built on ownership concept. Even another administrator, you have to share the password for them to get access, right? So I grant it with the full access permission, right? So I have granted the resource to this user. Now this resource is available for this user. This is an API user, doesn't have an ability to log in to view the password. So now we are going to see how we are going to get this function to work to retrieve that password using that API user. So let me go here, and I have the PowerShell examples right in front of you here, and I'm going to open PowerShell as admin. Right, so we have the PowerShell. Okay, ready. Let me open. So let me try to first tell you how to add resources using a post request in Password Manager Pro to add a new resource. So you can see the input data available here with the resource name. I will just name it as test underscore webinar, which is the new resource name I'm going to create with an account name called test123 maybe. And the resource type is Linux, password is test, and this is the post that we are going to use to add data into Password Manager Pro. Now we have supplied the input data. So what else is important is that you provide the URL, that is Password Manager Pro URL, the JSON, with the exact auth token for it to authenticate, right? So I'm going to add the new auth token that we just generated, right? So we have it. I'm going to execute this right here. Right, so it says test underscore webinar is added successfully into Password Manager Pro. So this is an example just to add one resource. You can create multiple requests and run it against Password Manager Pro to add multiple resources in a bulk into the product. Right, so we have a resource now added inside this API user. So now this user I have logged in is a super administrator, so it is not required for him to get anything shared to him. He can see anything he wants, being a super administrator in the product. So I go to the API user, and here it is, the resource that was just created by the API user. So if you see the description, it says added by API user, the name of the user here. So the API user is the owner of this resource. So now just let's check it out, the GET request. Open it in a new tab, right? So we have the GET request right here. Again, I'm going to update the auth token and what other information that we want. So we want a detail of a specific resource and what are all the accounts part of it, what are all the additional fields available on that particular resource, right? So we are going to find out the resource ID. Again, to find out the complete resource IDs of all the resources in Password Manager Pro can also be done using another API call. So you don't want to use this method I'm going to use right now. You can run another API call which would fetch down the complete resource IDs available in Password Manager Pro. The other simplest method I'm going to use it right now is back to the resources tab. Just to show it as an example, I have an AWS. If I just check the resource details, and the resource ID is available right here, which is 27602, which is what I'm going to use it in my code. I want the information about this particular resource using my API call, and I do a execute. All right. I guess it is actually executing the old one. Okay, so let's take a look at the put request. Let's get back again to the get request again. Looks like there is some wrong with the code. Right, so we have the put request, and I'm going to update the auth token again. So new auth token. So the reason for I'm going to reset the password now. So the reason is because the password is expired. I'm going to update the password using the input data, which would change the password actually on this particular account. Let me just find out the account ID and the resource ID. Account ID is 3303. Wait. Which I'm going to add 3303303, and the resource ID, which we already saw, 27602. Right? So we have it here. Right, so we have the correct auth token, and we are going to change the password to something else, like testing at 34567 8. So let me just do this. Yep, so password is changed. Right, so let me go back here, and if you open this account, then we have the password change. So you can also update the passwords in a bulk using this REST API. Let's once again try the GET request. Here we go. There was some connectivity problem, I guess. Right, so we have all the passwords fetched. Not all the passwords. About this particular resource, we were able to fetch all the information. So I just provided the resource ID and an auth token and the host name, which is already authenticated because this is the host name of my box that I use for authentication. So you can see that's the host name, and the auth token, it authenticates and it releases the information out of Password Manager Pro to the required API call. So this can be done in a bulk as well, as I told you. And also this helps you to eliminate the hard-coded passwords in any scripts or configuration files. So whenever a password is needed or any information is needed out of Password Manager Pro, REST API helps you to release that information from Password Manager Pro to wherever it is needed. And also the main advantage of RESTful API is that it is very easy to implement. So you can use it in any coding, or you can also use it in any automation tools like Ansible, Chef, or Jenkins. You can use it anywhere you want, as well as to do a server deployment, automated deployment of a server, or like a VM. If it requires a password, you can just build a code where whenever it requires a password, it takes it out of Password Manager Pro using the REST API call. Right, a few more examples. Now we just with PowerShell. So let's just another interesting thing, right? So we have resources. We saw how to fetch information, resources in Password Manager Pro. In a previous topic, we also discussed a little bit about the SSH keys, right, and Password Manager Pro. Even that can be achieved using Password Manager Pro. That is, if you want to add SSH keys into Password Manager Pro, you can easily add it using the APIs as well. So let's see how it can be done. I'm going to use so we have the PowerShell command to add the key. So I have our key right here, for which I'm going to change the name to something else. PMP KMP key. Right, so I have a file here which is called SSH underscore PMP KMP key, and I get back here. I will put this. Now I have to update the auth token, right? So let me first do that. Okay, so I have to specify the location where the key actually resides. So get location. I have to put it in my code. And PMP SSH underscore PMP KMP key. So it's what I'm gonna give, I guess. Yeah, that's correct. Right, so I have the key that is available right here, and I'm going to specify a key name, which is very important. I will just put it as webinar _2 test, and I have a passphrase that would be added. Right, so now let me execute this. So connection refused because I have a wrong host name. Right, so let's try it again. Right, which says the key. It's like there is another key with the same name. So now if you go back here, we have the new key that's added inside Password Manager Pro. So it also validates the key content. Since the key was already available, it did not allow us to do it. So it validates if the key is the same, has the same fingerprint, and if it has it, it does not allow it. Even if you put it with a new name, it does not accept it, because each and every key is counted against your licensing, right? So that's how you add data into Password Manager Pro using the APIs, retrieve information out of Password Manager Pro using the APIs, or change the passwords using the APIs and Password Manager Pro. A few more examples before we wrap up. So we have Python, and it's pretty much the same. So if you need these examples, feel free to contact us to the support email address, or you can directly contact me to my email address and I'll send it across to you. It will be easy for you to just use it as a template in order to create your own. Right, so this is a Python script that we have, and I'm going to use the same auth token. And yes, this is a GET request we are going to execute. Okay, so it provides us the complete information of the resource. So this is a GET request using which I can fetch the complete information of the resource from Password Manager Pro. Similarly, we can run, we'll see another resource. We'll just try to add another resource in Password Manager Pro, and this auth token, which would be used for authentication. And what is the name that keep is what we have to specify here. So I'll just say Windows _ new server. Account name, I will put it in the same name. I'll change the resource type to Windows. Password is test. So every other details are the same. Right, so now I'm going to add this. So you can add multiple fields as well right here to the input data. And let's run this. So it says resource added successfully inside Password Manager Pro. Get back here, back to resources. And there you see the new server that you just added with the exact resource type as Windows. So this is how you can add resources into Password Manager Pro using various methods using the APIs that we supply in Password Manager Pro. And a little bit about the SSH CLI and XML-RPC APIs and what are the advantages of RESTful API against this. So with SSH CLI based API or XML with RPC HTTPS based API, what you can do is just three functions: resource, passwords, and accounts. You'll be able to add it and retrieve the same information out of Password Manager Pro. No additional fields are allowed, and the same applies for SSH CLI based APIs as well. So just three functions that can be done. The two around resource, accounts, and passwords. And the same, like you will be able to fetch this information, you will be able to input this information, as well as you will be able to change this information using these APIs as well. How this authentication works is that XML-RPC uses certificate-based authentication, whereas SSH CLI-based API uses the public-private key for authentication. If you need any examples, feel free to contact us using Password Manager Pro support at ManageEngine.com, or you can also drop me a direct email to get the examples of any APIs that are available and supported in Password Manager Pro. So let's allot a few minutes for question and answers. And so you can just use the question and answer question control panel that you have to post your questions, and I'll be happy to answer those. Right, so let's wait for questions. Right, so in the meantime, you can just go to the RESTful API documentation, where you can see the complete list of functions which are available right here with the examples that you can take a look. You need any help, feel free to contact us, and we'll be happy to help you out in integrating the API with your applications. So the only motive is to have the passwords stored in a secure vault instead of putting them in a hard-coded in a configuration file or a script file. You don't want to do it anymore after you leverage the API usage in Password Manager Pro. And the XML-RPC and SSH CLI examples are available right here in our help documentation. Right, so let's wait for the questions. So the first question of the day we have here is, how do we handle multiple requests from the same host? So as I mentioned, an API token is assigned to a single host in Password Manager Pro. So if you want to have multiple requests, you can add the same host name for multiple API users. So you have to end up creating multiple API users, but we have an option here in Password Manager Pro, not just a single option, two options. Okay, so you can always drop us an email to enable this. This requires a little bit of background work. That is, you have to enable this in a configuration file, right? So if multiple requests are made from the same host, first option is to create multiple API users. If you don't want to end up creating multiple API users, first option is you can provide it in a CSV format, the same host name, IP address. Like you say, for example, the IP address changes dynamically into two different IPs. You can provide it in a CSV format, or you can also put the fully qualified domain name in a CSV format. So the configuration has to be enabled. You can drop us an email. We'll help you out with the configuration. And the third option will be really interesting. So as I told you, API authenticates using the host name and the auth token. So if you don't want to check the host name, if it is a multiple request raised from the single host, or if you have the same request raising it from the multiple hosts, we can completely disable the host name check. That is, only the auth token will be used as the authentication mechanism to release the password out of Password Manager Pro. So this also requires a configuration. You can drop us an email. We'll help you out with it. Thank you. So I have another question. How do we add resource groups and assign resources to the resource groups? Yes, it's very much possible to add resource groups as well using the RESTful API, and you can add resources or accounts into it using the RESTful API as well. So if you want the example input data or command, just let me know and we'll help you out with it. So I have another question. Do you have any default plugins available? Yes, so actually, like, we do not have a default plugin available right at this moment, but our development team is already doing some research using Jenkins and Ansible, and that would be available shortly. But we have customers already using it. We have a few customers already built their own code using Jenkins and Ansible, using which they do a lot of automation. So just any specific request you have around the automation, just feel free to drop us an email. Let's work together to get going. Recap the third option for multiple hosts required. So the third option for multiple, I have another question here, which is, can you recap the third option for multiple hosts required? Yes. So the third option is to completely disable the host name check. So that is, when you create an API user in Password Manager Pro, I said there is a host name and the auth token used for authentication, right? So when I add an API user, host name and auth token should be valid in order to Password Manager Pro to authenticate and allow the user. So when you have multiple hosts doing the same request and you don't want to end up creating multiple users in Password Manager Pro, we have an option that you can turn it off from the backend, where Password Manager Pro will not validate the host name. Instead, it will validate only the auth token and release the information. Again, it is totally up to you. You have to safeguard the auth token, or you have to rotate the auth token periodically and make sure that it is safe. Right. Thank you so much for your patience throughout the session. And if you have any additional questions, feel free to send us an email to passwordmanagerpro-support@manageengine.com. And all the questions that I have received so far will be drafted as a document, and it will be uploaded right here in the webinar registration link, and you can take a look at it anytime you want. Once again, thank you so much for being so attentive, participants, and you all have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye-bye.